what law enforcement directs us to do, because at that point, we're at their mercy. So we have to wait to hear from us before there's a peep in your classroom.
All right. Any other questions about lockdown, lockout? Okay,
Thank you.
So I'm really excited about today because we've been working on this for a while. We've been working on a lot of different things. We've been looking at our data. We've been having discussions within the Academic Senate about PLCs and how we can better support that process throughout our school. And one of the things that has bubbled up is this idea of what's the big picture. And so I had this idea of and I wanted to, but I couldn't find any puzzles at the 99-cent store. Apparently kids don't do puzzles anymore. But if I were to give everybody a puzzle piece and I were to ask you, go ahead and put that together, what's the first thing you would ask me for?
The finished product.
The finished product. Show me the picture so I understand what my piece is and where my piece goes. Otherwise, we will spend a whole lot of time just trial and error trying to figure it out. So we want to be very focused. And so that's what today is going to be. I also liken it unto this. If this is mission control, if I'm in the control tower, I need to be aware, I being Daryl, myself, district admin, and our counselors are very well aware of a lot of the pieces, but I need to know all the flight plans for every plane coming in my way. Everyone in my airspace, I need to know what the flight plans are. If you're the pilot, you don't need to know everybody's flight plan. You just need to know your own. Okay, so it's really important that you guys understand the big picture, so that way when crazy control tower says, hey, I need you to veer left and do X, Y, and Z, you understand that it's not just out of the blue for no reason, but there is a very specific purpose for that. So, that being said, I'm going to frame our conversation with, we're going to start and end in the same place. Because the big question is, why do we do school? Question mark, right? Why are we here? What is our purpose as a group that comes together every day? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? So we're going to start by watching, it's a pretty stark video. It's not happy, warm, fuzzy, so this is why I didn't choose to end with it. But if I could get, Denise, if you could get the lights, please. So please, your attention up here, and then we'll have a quick chat about it, but it's going to frame our discussion.
What can we do to protect ourselves from robot automation?
The CEO explained that machines will replace traditional labor.
This is all about artificial intelligence and how much faster it can process.
Human labor is never going to be cheaper as we get more advanced, so we're just going to have to adjust to that and deal with the results.
For 3.3 million years, humans have developed technologies to make our lives easier. These inventions made us more efficient and meant we didn't have to spend as much effort working to survive. But each new development came at a cost. When bronze tools were invented, all the guys who made stone tools were driven out of work. And when iron tools came along, all of the bronze workers lost their jobs. When the Industrial Revolution hit, it wiped out the livelihoods of millions of cobblers and weavers who had to adapt or get left behind. And this process continues today. Only now it's happening faster. Much, much faster. All kinds of routine jobs have become automated in the past few years, thanks to breakthroughs in technologies like robotics and radio frequency identification, computing, and high-speed networking. And at the same time, another powerful force, globalization, is making it easier for companies to move jobs overseas where wages are lower and regulations are less stringent. In the past 20 years, these two forces, technology and globalization, have wiped out millions of American jobs in manufacturing, from Detroit's auto plants to North Carolina's textile mills. And it's not just manufacturing jobs. We're now entering a dramatically new phase where high-skilled jobs are also at risk. Here's why. Since 1965, computer processing power has roughly doubled every 2 years. All of the computing power that controlled the Apollo mission to the moon can now fit on the chip inside your smartphone. And in a few decades, computers will be thousands of times more powerful than they are today. Already, computers use artificial intelligence to easily beat the world's greatest chess masters, recognize faces, understand spoken language, and even compose music. They can do many of the things that we've always thought made us human, and that threatens many of the jobs we've always thought were secure. Take driving a vehicle, which is one of the top jobs in most states in America. With driverless cars already on public roads, millions of truck drivers, bus drivers, and taxi drivers may soon find themselves obsolete. In hospitals, hundreds of thousands of jobs are on the line, as computers learn to analyze CAT scans and biopsies, deliver low-level anesthesia, and even do surgical procedures. And in restaurants, hundreds of thousands of cooks may be replaced in the coming decades by machines that can follow recipes perfectly without ever taking a sick day or a smoke break. An Oxford University study predicts that within 20 years, 47% of all jobs are at risk of being replaced by technology. That's over 70 million people. And at the same time, globalization is also affecting high-skilled jobs in ways that it never has before. Law firms, for example, are beginning to outsource work to lawyers in developing nations who are trained in American law. These lawyers can do legal research and even review contracts for a fraction of the cost of an American lawyer. Now, just as technology and globalization destroy jobs, it's important to point out that they also create jobs by generating new industries and new markets for American products. We don't know exactly what the future is going to look like, but we do know this. Millions of American workers, white collar and blue collar, young and old, are about to face enormous, difficult transitions. We're living longer than ever before and will be forced to change our jobs more often than any people in history. We're going to need to learn new skills constantly throughout our careers to keep from being left behind. This revolution in the job market is not coming in the distant future. It's happening now, and it's going to accelerate. It's going to affect all of us, our friends, our families, and our communities. Are you ready? Visit us at workingnation.com.
We're all gonna die! Ah! All right. So, I told you, we don't want to end with that just because it's a little, but so poignant, right? So this time, I'm going to ask a very pointed question. For me, this is a dinner conversation that I could honestly talk about for like hours on end. But I'm going to ask a pointed question, table talk, okay? What implications does this have for schools, specifically Oath? What implications does this video, what we just heard and watched, have for Oath? Ready, set, go.
What's the answer? I'm not going to tell you. There's an actual answer? Yes. No, what do you guys, what do you think from the standpoint of how we teach? Just because no, it's just a general
So they get computer teachers.
Productive struggle, productive struggle. So I'm gonna ask that you finish up that last thought in 5, 4, 3, 2, and back together at 1. All right, like I said, this could get it's a really rich discussion. But I'd like to hear just a couple of points. What did you talk about? What came up? What are the implications for Oak when we see something like this? Not all at yes. Teacher needs to be flexible.
And teaching kids to be flexible.
Teaching needs to be flexible, and teaching kids teaching kids how to be flexible, right? Okay, good. What else?
Possibility we're training kids for jobs that don't even exist yet.
Absolutely, right? We have no idea how to train them specifically for their job. What big skills can we give them, right?
I was gonna say something specific along the lines of that, like introducing coding on our campus, since we don't have that, and that can help kids maybe for those jobs that have been creating it or about to be.
Awesome. That's a huge implication. Are we offering what they need in order to be successful moving forward? Great. This table.
We talk about technology, but just making sure they can adapt to change.
Adaptability. Great. Back table.
We talked about coding, but as things change, we can't keep doing the things we've always been doing. If we do this, the kids will never, if we can't change, they're not gonna change. They're gonna get the same thing and we're just gonna get left behind.
Modeling, and then also if we're not keeping up, we're going to keep giving them stuff that may not be as applicable, right? Yes, back here.
Okay, I think it's also important, as an arts teacher, I think it would be very easy, this shows us it'd be very easy to let go of the quote whole person and just teach to the one point. And I think as teachers, it's also up to us to include the whole person and still include arts in what we teach, because it's not really included in what they quote need, but we all know that the whole person is what we all need at some point. So as an arts teacher, I think that's important.
And I would say, one of a technical term that we could use that encompasses the arts, but also touches in every classroom, would be that creativity, right? We're talking about how do we teach our kids how to tap into their own creativity and express it. This table.
We talked about adaptability as well, like helping the kids learn to be adaptable to their situations, but also about like giving them the vision too, like helping them to start to think about where do I want to go, or what's the point of what I'm doing in class, so that they're caring about it in a different way. We can care about it and catch the vision, but if they don't also share that, then what motivates them to be inventive or creative themselves?
Yeah, this is their education. We're done, right? I mean, unless you want to go back and pursue a doctorate, we're done. But what does it mean for them? And I shouldn't say we're done, because we are lifelong learners, right? Okay, this table.
Actually,
Anything new?
well,
No, I thought
funny
something really
because, I when watching this, I talk, I kind of like mentioned, well, we can automate as teachers. So we didn't really think about like the concept of,
You said they can or they cannot?
they can,
Yeah.
we could be automated,
Distance learning is real, people.
yeah.
Distance learning is real, right? There's somebody on a screen and, communicating with somebody in another country, and they're getting that same degree as someone who's sitting in the classroom.
But then how do you create the creativity part of it in regards to what
Right.
Jack said in the arts,
Yeah.
and just in
Right.
general as, that one-on-one.
Marta?
But then also, how do you ensure, like going back to the whole person, like how do you ensure that as we drive towards greater technology, we continue to have like interpersonal skills and we know how to still communicate with one another, because I feel like that's going to get lost.
My heart is full to overflowing because of where we're headed in our conversation. Thank you for that. All right, this table.
Well, we were kind of talking, like, for instance, like Jimmy and me, like, we really need to step up what we're doing. Like, I'd have to be teaching, like, applied mathematics or something, and these kids are gonna be, like, engineers, coders, something like that. The same with this class, the same with teaching coding.
Okay, more tech. And I hope that we're getting more than, tech is a big piece, but more than tech, right? Because if I had to change my job 7 times in a lifetime, I'm going to need some serious coping skills because that's a lot of stress. That's what I'm thinking about, right? All right, and last but not least.
A lot of the same, just, yeah, the need for technology in our classrooms.
Technology in the classroom. How about some old school technology? There it is. Very good. All right, so yes, technology is awesome, and I promise you, we are investing in that. We've looked at our numbers. We're not too far away from 1-to-1 within our core classes. So however we can utilize our budget to make that happen, that's great, but we all know computers are not the answer, right? It just because you have a device doesn't mean it's going to make a difference in a student's education. So there's a lot that goes behind it. But I'm going to do something, I'm going to model a strategy that's pretty low tech, and I'm going to show my vulnerability. This is a risk for me. I've never used this strategy, but it's an ELD strategy we learned at GLAD training, but I would argue it's just good instruction. If I were in the classroom, so this is my teacher hat, if I were in the classroom, I would actually ask all the students to be a little bit closer so that way you could see what's happening here. But you'll get the picture that I'm from as we go along. And then also you have the PowerPoint at your table, and I'm going to ask that you do follow along. The slides might not match exactly what we're doing up here on the board, but please take notes. There is also, I'm going to give you your hint, you have an exit ticket. It's a 3-2-1, so I am going to ask that you write down 3 things you've learned, 2 things you would like to know more about, and then at the end you'll have 1 question you want to ask, okay? So that's your exit ticket. If as you're listening and following along, you can start writing that. So we started really big, and today we are talking about the most important thing, right? Why do we school, right? Why do we do school? And we just talked about, right, we are trying to get our kids to be college, career, and life ready. And that's just such a loaded statement. There's so much behind it. We usually talk about like that college piece for us, high school, college, but we really want to start thinking about those life skills that are going to help our kids be successful throughout. So that's a really big picture. So we're going to start big and then get smaller. And as we all know, this is the United States of America, right? This is the best school in the United States of America, including Puerto Rico, that's right, and Guam and the Virgin Islands. That's a really long thing to say, though. But our school does not exist in a vacuum, and we do not exist for ourselves. We have some very important stakeholders, the most important being who? Students. All right, so we have, it's really cute when you get a chance to come up here and look. We have all these wonderful students. When we talk about our students, why do we school? The question is, for whom do we do what we do? And we talk about our students, we have all types of students. We have GATE students. We have students who are on grade level, right? Yay, yay, fun. We have struggling students. Challenging. Oops, I'm struggling with my spelling. We have ELD students. We have Title I students. Anyone know what Title I students are? Lower socioeconomic, right? McKinney-Vento students, so students who are considered homeless. Foster children are grouped into this category. So we have our Title I students, and then we also have students with IEPs, so students who are in our special education program because they have a certain disability. So when we talk about students, man, that's a whole lot. This is our audience. Who else are the stakeholders for Oak? Families, right? I can't tell you how often we spend time with the adults who are their first teachers and who are most heavily invested in our students' lives. And last, certainly not least, and some could argue, some of the most important people. Who else are the stakeholders? Staff. Staff, all right, so you see there's some tired people in here, some happy folks. All right, so here we are, all together. This is our who, this is our why. Earlier in the year, we talked about using our friends at the Inflection Consulting Group. And I recognize that some people are more versed in the work that we've been doing with Inflection. And we've been using our academic senate, so our department chairs, to actually be that middle person, so that way the Inflection, we can't have a pull-out day for the entire staff, unfortunately. So we do have a smaller group. Hopefully that information is flowing back out and your input is flowing back in. But the question has been asked, and a good question, is why did we need Inflection? What is their purpose? Inflection, and you can't see this from back here, so I will write this, and hopefully it'll be a bigger font for you. But their whole goal is to help schools help their kids become college, career, and life ready. And so their model is this triangle thing here. The first piece of this is identity. Because identity informs. Informs what? What we have engaged in originally, early at the beginning of the year. Remember, we talked about what does it call, if you were graduating from high school, you were walking across that stage, what skills would you wish that you had back in high school, and what would you wish for your kids? Remember, we did all that. We gathered that information, uploaded it, and we sent it away. And then our students engaged in that really cool process of coming up, designing an animal that best represents our school, what they would want our school to be, as well as what our school is. And they took that data. And our parents also took the same survey that we took. And we did not do this alone. We did this with Temple City High School, which is why Dr. Lasher is here as well. And we got all of that data, sent it to Inflection, and this is what they do. They glean through the data, and they help find the themes and the most important pieces of it, because they are helping us to identify our identity, if that makes sense. Because rather than just, hey, we're a school, we're not just any school, we're the best school in America. We are the Royals. Well, what does that mean exactly? So what that process allows us to do, it gives us reflection time, and it also provides us direction of where we should go. Because we do not exist in a vacuum. We belong to Temple City, and Temple City belongs to us. And we should be very proud of what the data has shown and how our families and our students feel about our schools. They really do love us and they trust us. It was amazing to get that feedback. But I have here this little picture of a kitten looking inside a mirror, and what's reflected back? Marlise?
A lion.
A lion. First of all, we're the Royals. But it's that cute idea, right, that like how you envision yourself, it reinforces what we believe about ourselves. So we get into this kind of a loop, right? We say, who are we? We ask that question, and that in turn informs our practices. We can intentionally plan school to reflect the values that we hold dear, and to reflect the important information that college, career, and life readiness that will match our students and our family. So that is why we've engaged with Inflection. After we reflect, it helps us build our structure. So the next piece here is the structure, because the structure is what supports our students. Not just our students, but all of our stakeholders. So you have this piece here. So we know that we are under construction. We're always under construction, kind of like we're never going to get done, and that's okay. But we want to make sure that we are intentional as we build our structures and our supports, so that way we're not just aiming aimlessly, right? That whole idea, if you don't know where you go, if you don't know where you're going, how will you know when you get there? We want to be very intentional about how we build, and then that gives us that focus, the target for our structure, as well as evaluating the structure to know, did we get there? Are we hitting the mark? Where do we need to improve? We will not improve if we do not ask the questions, how can we get better? Just like what our friend Fred said back there, right? If we're not changing it up, right, we're not necessarily going to be keeping up with the times. So that last piece, once we have our structure that supports students, it leads to learning. And learning empowers. Learning empowers actually our students, and we can hit that target that we were after. So then, questions so far, we good? Everyone following along? All right. So also along the way, when I first landed here, if you remember, I like my alphabets, all the acronyms. I started MTSS, 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 right? Multi-tiered system of support. Why do we need a multi-tiered system of support? Because as our friend Jack pointed out, we don't want just kids that know how to play on their phones and the computers. We want kids that are well-rounded. So what do we call that in educationese? We address the what? The whole child. So when we build our multi-system of support, multi-tiered system, it's one system of supports, it's multiple supports. The English teacher in me, that really matters. It's one system, multiple supports. When we are building our multi-tiered system, we address these three areas. And the first one that school usually does a pretty good job, and I will tell you, we're pretty darn good, it's that academic piece. Well, what does academics mean specifically? Because that's just a very broad term. It's the academic skills. More important, right? It's the skills that transfer. And it's the content knowledge as well as scholastic habits that students learn in order to be academically successful, not just here at Oak, because this is not their last stop. The next area that we address when we're working to support the whole child is behavior. And then we know the third one is social emotional, but sometimes people get a little confused. What's the difference between behavior and social emotional? So I put here with behavior hands, because behavior is that action oriented, right? Actions for individual success. Am I showing up to class on time? Am I treating others with respect? Am I turning in my homework? Interactions with others and that executive functioning part of the brain that, oh my gosh, sometimes it's like, it's not existent right now, okay? So those are the behaviors. How do we teach the kids to interact in the world? If we're going to the symphony, I'm going to see Wicked tonight, and if kids have only been to a rock concert and I take them to see Wicked, how might they behave? Yeah, inappropriately, right? So how do we teach our kids the behaviors to be successful in all types of environments? And then finally, we have our social emotional. And what does that mean? That's a big heart there, because that's mindsets and attitudes. Mindsets and attitudes for success, that expression and management of emotions, which honestly, sometimes I struggle, and I'm an adult. But how about our 12 and our 13-year-olds running around campus? They really need help in, oh my God, I feel so overwhelmed. Or I was talking to a mom and, my kid tells me he feels so sad all the time. How do I help? How do I help my child understand and express their emotions positively? So that becomes something that we get to support. And then also that self and relational capacity. So how are they interacting with others depends on how they're feeling and managing their self inside. So this is how we support the whole child, and our fun job is to build a system. And we know, why is this split into 3 colors? What's the bottom one? Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 1 is all students. Tier 2 is some students. Tier 3 is few students. So when we look at supporting the kids, we need to say, how are we going to support all the kids? How are we going to work with those kids that aren't getting it? And these kids really need a lot of support. How do we do that in each of these domains? So that's a really good question. How do we do that, Jamie? Well, Every school, every organization is bound by the resources that they have. And usually the resources, and we are no exception, the first one is time. How do we use our time to support our work? The second one, arguably one of the most important, is the people. The people as resources. This is a big category. For our intents and purposes on this board, we're focusing on teachers, but we have a lot of people. We have our classified staff, our admin, our counselors, so instructional aides. When we say people, it's everybody, but what you're going to see here is how the teachers function in this as a resource. And then, of course, we have money as a resource. When not enough, right? And one could argue we don't have enough time, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough people to do the work. One could make that argument. Or we can look at each of these resources to see, are we truly managing each of these resources and maximizing them? What are the best practices? And more importantly, how do we know if we are maximizing? I'm going to take an aside here. If I had symptoms, if I had a cough, if I had a rash and a fever, and I go to a doctor, and it's like this weird thing, when I go to the doctor, and my doctor got his or her degree in 1987, do I want that doctor to have stopped at 1987 medicine? No. I don't want my doctor going back to a book that's been sitting on a shelf and looking. Doctor's probably going to jump online. I can't figure this out. Let me narrow it down. I'm going to talk to colleagues. What's the latest and greatest? What's the newest medicine, right? So how are we performing in that professional capacity? Because if you talk to your friends in other industries, they're using data to make better decisions and to analyze, is this working? If not, what do we do? So we are super rad because here at Oak Avenue, best school in America, we have several structures that help us. Several meaning a couple. Actually, we do have a lot of structures, but our teachers are specifically organized into departments. Traditionally, most schools, this is how they function. The only time they collaborate is with their departments or in elementary schools by grade level. Here at Oak, we also have these awesome blossom teams. So, sometimes we meet in our department as a staff, sometimes we meet in departments, sometimes we meet as a team. What's really cool is the flexibility and the focus of each group and of each of the resources. So we'll go to the easy one, bell schedule. When we're talking about the resource of time, obviously we're talking about our bell schedule. And we're also looking at, oops, wrong spot. We're looking at what can we do before school and also how can we support kids after school, but really, where do we really need to focus? If we're going to build a system for all students, where do we need to focus? During. So this is a big piece for us. When we talk about our money, what do we spend money on? We spend money on training, right? All of the PD that we go to. Maybe we bring in a consultant. We spend money on programs, on supplies, and then on that, and I put it in the wrong spot again, on technology. So how are we spending the money for this? When we look at our departments, there's a very specific focus. Departments are responsible for curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Basically, traditional school, what we think about. So that's their responsibility. And this is the really cool, unique part about Oak, with teams. And maybe you've seen on my email, I've changed it up, there's no longer a quote there. It says, know the name, know the face, know the story. So when we talk about social emotional support, the first thing we need to do is be able to know who our kids are, who are the players in the room. We are uniquely poised because we have this really cool structure that really supports both behavior as well as social emotional. While most schools only have academics or only have departments, which there's crossover, but mostly it's a focus on the academics. So do you see how we have a really good structure that could potentially build a really awesome system here? Now we don't just operate in these big groups, we do have some leadership groups, or we have some distributed leadership roles. So the folks that help out with the money is controlled by admin, yay, fun, lots of fun, but also we have school site council. And their job is to review data, to create a plan, and then to budget money. So that's how their role is. But they do, and you guys know that we have elected folks from classified, from certificated, we have family members, and we also have students who sit on this. And then for teams, our structure is team liaisons. And for departments, our structure is department chairs. When it comes to time, I'm just going to write this one in. This is a bit of a flexible piece. We do have a compliance part, right? We have to be in school. For middle school, I think it's 54,600, something like that. For high school, it's like 64,000 minutes that they have to have. But so administration is responsible for compliance, but how are we going to use that time? Then we bring in our site leadership teams as well, which would be our academic senate and our liaisons who represent everybody in those different roles to think about how can we adjust our time? How do we best utilize our structures? I'm almost done, I promise. Getting back to the departments, something that's been new and maybe a little bit, I'll say disconcerting for some, because not having the big picture piece, is we've spent a lot of focus this year on departments, whereas in years past, we've spent a lot more time in teams. The reason we're spending time in the departments is, right, we need to work on that academic piece. We're getting caught up and we're learning about a process known as professional learning communities, PLCs. Many of you have heard of that term before. It gets used a lot. Sometimes it's just referred to as the time that we meet together. Yeah, we're going to PLC it, like it's a verb almost. But PLC has a very specific process. It's inquiry-based. So that means that we are it's this reflection piece. So I'm going to write in here, it allows for reflection, and it allows for planning, and then it allows for reflection, and it allows for planning. So it just kind of loops back. In our department meetings next Tuesday, everyone will be reading an article that we went through as an academic senate that lays out what a PLC is and what it is not. So we will all have a common language and a common understanding. So this process is what we utilize in order to improve student achievement. I already mentioned, how do we know if students are learning? What are we looking at? Data. Okay? You know how much data is out there, you guys. You saw how many trees we killed to get you all that CASP information, right? Tons of data. Overwhelming amounts of data. But we want to be more specific so we can meet our target, because otherwise it's just too much. So this here is an instructional focus. One of the best practices of schools that perform well is, remember, we need to know where we're going. We want to know what's the target. Academically, what are we helping our kids, what skills do they need? So we have been asked by district, and it's best practice, to create an instructional focus. And usually those are really big chunks. We talked about this the last time we met, if you can go back that far. It's a big chunk, it's like skills. So it's usually reading and writing or critical thinking, communicating. It's big because this becomes the instructional focus that happens in all classes throughout the day. So if it's writing, how are we using writing in PE? If it's English, obviously we're writing. But how do you write like a scientist? How do you write like a historian? So an instructional focus helps us become more targeted. So when we meet, we can say, okay, we're talking about writing. I'm in the history PLC. Let's talk about DBQs and how we use first and secondary primary and secondary sources. And how are we going to help our students? So we get targeted. So when we're looking at data, it's not just, data, it's data we have chosen because it helps us focus. Make sense? This process, this overall process becomes a wash, rinse, repeat. Because once we nail that, cross it off the list, we don't just throw out writing. We continue the writing piece, and now we're going to add a layer of critical thinking. So we start talking about sources, etc. Usually an instructional focus will stick around at a school for 2, maybe 3 years, and it happens in every single classroom and is reinforced over and over until we feel like Oak students and Oak teachers, because this becomes new for us. We really got a handle on it. Now we want to throw something else in there, another flavor in there to make our soup even better. The process of PLC uses our resources to help support our MTSS, supporting the whole child in academics, behaviors, and social emotional. But that system is informed by the study we did with our friends of who are we, because we want to support our stakeholders, because we are the best school in America, and we prepare our kids to be college, career, and life ready. Do I drop the mic now? All right. Does everyone see, like, that's the big picture? Yes? I'm going to ask that you, because I've been talking like crazy, I'm going to ask that you take about 30 seconds to talk at your tables. What idea has come up? What's new? What questions? Excitement? Oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. What ideas are floating around? Go for it.
Create my career in general. This is what I think she's given us. Every time, 3 things that they talk about: academic, social, behavior, I mean, this is what I think about. Felt like you building a culture
I don't have any other. Yeah, that's confusing. My kids in school first time.
Okay. Go ahead and wrap that final thought up, please. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and final thought 1. All right, thank you guys. I know, again, this is a lot of information. I'm trying to honor our time together so we can end on time. What ideas, what big ideas, or what did you talk about? You don't have tomatoes or anything to throw at me, right? Nothing? We talked about nothing?
Well, I think one of the things that I found interesting is how much effort as teachers now really put into the social and emotional well-being of our students versus 30 to 50 years ago, where they're getting a lot of that, a vast majority, at home, with family and extended family, interaction with friends off campus, cousins, and now it's, instead of teachers of academics, we really need to mold, we have a much larger responsibility now.
Huge. Did anyone else key in on that? Like, whoa, it's a whole lot. So much so, and you know what, whether it's right, wrong, indifferent, not for us to say, it just is, right? You know how that saying, it is what it is? So whenever someone says that, I always respond with, yes, but it will be what we make it. So you know what, guys, it is what it is. They need social emotional support, they need behavior support. Okay, what are we going to do about it? So this has become such a big topic that if you visit CDE, California Department of Ed, they have come up with standards for SEL, which is social emotional learning, which means that there should be a tier 1. What are all students learning about social emotional? So how are we at this age? It's like, how do we cope with frustration, right? So there's different curriculum that's out there, and it's very overwhelming. It can be overwhelming.
And I think that leads to the way that schools are set up needs to change. Because we don't have a setup right now that allows us time to teach social emotional learning. So where do you put that in?
Or do we? So that becomes, right, so I'm going, and the reason that I said, bell schedule, like this is going to be, all of this, just so you know, this is not a one and done. I just wanted everyone to see the big picture. We're gonna put this in the staff lounge so you can kind of look at it and come up with questions, or it'll kind of sink in a little bit more, which again, if this is an instructional strategy in the classroom, you leave it in the room and it's always there with the kids, just saying. But we are going to be coming back to revisit a lot of these things, like how are we using our data, our instructional focus, our time together, the overall system. We need to do some time here reflecting. So this is, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, which I will tell you, I've been reluctant to share all of this because I get that it can be overwhelming. But then it's like, why am I flying in this pattern if I don't understand the big picture? So, yes, Marta, I agree. And also, SEL, social emotional learning, does not need to be a separate period. It is often taught, you guys are teaching it all the time, whether you realize it or not. Yeah, when you're interacting. But how can we be intentional? I want us to focus on that word, intentional, about all kids learning this particular skill. Other ideas that popped up? Jack?
I'll be really honest. Big lump in my throat, swallowing, realizing I'm gonna have to change. I mean, teachers hate change, to be honest. We hate change. But just, you know, I look at this and I go, I know I'm a music teacher, I don't teach math, science, English. If I'm gonna have, I mean, my question I still have is, are we gonna have music in 10 years? And so I look at that board and I go, if I do everything exactly the way I'm doing it right now, no. I can answer that question. So I have to look at that and go, wow, okay, I'm gonna have to change. If I care and if I really want to see a healthy school, all of that, all the above, I'm gonna have to change. So I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of going, whoa, okay, let the dust settle in my mind, I think, for me. But I don't know that it's a bad thing for me, but just kind of realizing, wow, okay, all right. I think for me, where do I start? For me, in my subject, I go, well, okay, where am I going to have to start? So.
Very good. Lisa, did you want to respond to that? Or?
Yes, you already do teach a huge number of kids to cooperate, respect each other,
Yeah.
and produce a beautiful product.
Right.
So I think in some ways you're closer to the overall goal than the rest of us.
It's the opposite side though for us, like the writing and stuff. Like we don't do a ton of writing in our class. I can't remember. I've always wanted to do like, oh, let's do an album review, and like you listen to an album and you do it, but we're so performance driven, and like I got a marching band performance in 2 months. I got a concert 2 weeks after that. Like would love to, but I like everybody knows I got to do well at the parade, so that's like
and
the opposite side.
And giving back, they communicate in a real
Yeah.
situation. You guys are
Well, and, all right. That's a nice pat on the back, but I mean, I guess I'm kind of speaking maybe for some other people in the room too. You can't look at that and go, yeah, I'm doing everything right. I don't have to change. I think all of us have to look at that and go, whoa, okay, wow.
Kaylee?
Yeah, it kind of feels like I've got to not only be like fit, but like athletic game ready, because as soon as that bell rings, it feels like there's not a second to waste, but you also don't want to feel like the kids are coming in and there's like this frantic pace, but how do you like internalize it to the point that it's so structured and organized that there's room for the social emotional, because there's so many standards to cover that just trying to get through, you know, the book or all the material that's got to be covered, that takes a lot of time. And I think about, you know, at this point, and I'm like very early on in my career, my lessons that I feel like, man, that was really great on a social emotional level, those take a lot of time, and it's like a real slow down the pace. So how do you merge those two? And I think it feels like I just have to get better at it, like getting those messages across quicker, so it's not taking 30 minutes to get there, but the kids have got that impact faster.
I just, and I mean, obviously there are no answers. There's a lot of questions. This is like good for us to discuss, but I would argue that the first thing is awareness. And I think that we have that, what I really am hoping is that we have that common language and a common vision of, okay, first that awareness piece. What? We know the why because we saw that video of like, oh my God, that's the why, right? And the kids are the why, but what is it that we need to do? So, okay, we need to build a system that's gonna meet all kids, and we're gonna really focus on the whole child. So now when I'm planning, it's as simple as, you know what, here's my regular lesson. How am I gonna touch social emotional? You know, like how can I incorporate that? Whether they're reflecting on, hey, how do you think that those, the people who were invaded, their village was invaded, how do you think they felt? Or, you know, hey guys, how are you doing today? I see that, you know, the energy's kind of low, is check-in. So it's, what are you doing intentionally? But that just means, first and foremost, is that awareness and then the intention. The other thing I really want to encourage everybody with is this process using PLCs. The best part is, you're not alone in this. Like, we have 3 teachers doing the exact same content in every single grade and level. Think about that. Why should you have to invent every single thing when you can say, hey, oh my gosh, how do you teach this piece? Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. I'm going to tweak it this way. You're not in a vacuum. It's not isolation. You guys are, I wish if I could go back to a classroom, I would be such an amazing teacher because I've seen so many great strategies. So if you share, and then we reflect and we say, oh man, look at, yeah, that was awesome. Oh no, that one didn't work. We're using data to make our decisions. I'm telling you, unstoppable. So, we're really close to the end. We do want to share with you the stakeholder feedback because we did get part 1 back from Inflection. And part 2, they will be back on January 29th. So, as this warms up, I'll just tell you, we went through that process. We had 58 families who responded. We had all of the Oak students participate in that animal activity. We had 50 Temple City High School students participate, and we had 54 Oak staff and 61 Temple City High School staff give their input. So it was very well-rounded. Rest assured, Oak was very represented in this data. And so I would like to invite Fred to come on up. You guys also have this information. This is everything, the engagement report is everything that we have received from Inflection. We don't want anyone to feel like there's a secret cult going on. This is what we've been talking about, so you can read it at your leisure.
We're all talking behind your backs.
Yeah.
Word cloud. Wow, it's almost as bad as the copy.
It is, I'm sorry.
This is our word cloud. The light blue is very, very faint, and on your copy it's not as good. The word cloud was basically taken, Inflection took all the information from the surveys and all the words that sort of just popped out in the frequency. And the more frequent the word was used, the bigger the colors, just to break it up and make it look pretty. The smaller words were the words that were occasionally used. And it's just sort of a representation of all the surveys of these are the words that represent Oak Avenue. And sort of uniquely, Inflection found sort of a very unique thing. The positivity of the words, we are very unique in that, where they've done this at a lot of schools, and they found this to be sort of they were surprised at how positive things were as opposed to other things that they've done with other schools. So we are in a good place, and that's our word cloud. So you have a copy of it there. You can,
and I can send out a digital copy because the projector's kind of dulling it, but there's a big gap there. That word is confident. Right next to compassionate, between compassionate and strong, the big word there is confident. That big right there.
Yeah.
Yes. So you can't see it really, but
it's in there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's right here.
There you go. All right. So again, they said that it was a pleasure to read our data because usually this is all anonymous. So when people have the chance to be anonymous, they will throw their digs out there and, you know, air out the dirty laundry. And they were like, wow, your kids and your families and your staff really love your schools. And this was Oak and Temple City. So I'd like to invite, oh, Michelle, I did you dirty, girl. I didn't do what I said I was gonna do. Thank you.
Okay. We have a new mascot. We are no longer home of the Royals. We are now, say it with me, the Ugly Otters. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So,
Still a lion
I
head.
practiced saying that over and over. I still can't get it. Okay. So, this was the hybrid animal that we compiled when asking all of our students to identify and create a new mascot for fun. So these kind of reflect the values and what they hope to find in friends and also in fellow classmates and even develop as themselves. So I think one of the biggest things was, of course, lion for loyalty or dog for loyalty. They really thought that was important. And I guess at this age it makes sense, you know, they want to be known as a person who can be counted on as a friend and things like that. They also really loved the lions were strong and proud. They stuck the otter in there. There is something, do you guys know what a water bear is? Yeah, someone put something about a water bear. I mean, it's just amazing. So these are our kids. Anyway, so if you see that hybrid, those are all the things that are really important to not just our kids. I believe this also included the high school, and then did this include the families?
No, just the kids.
Yeah, just the kids, and then so it gives us a good idea of what they value. So that is one.
Thank you very much.
So the next piece was, after Inflection looked at all of our data, they decided to narrow down to 3 major themes. And they looked at the words, they kind of clumped them together, and they came up with these 3 words: thinkers, motivated, and honorable. So again, this is summarizing what our kids said, and also what our community said, what the staff said. And I don't know about you guys, but I know right now, this is covering what Jamie has on the board, but to me, it really reflects those 3 circles for MTSS. You know, when I think of the thinkers, you look at things like academics, knowledgeable, wise, also including things like some of the soft skills, like creativity. Motivated, I think of that as like behavior, it's an action word. And persevering, things like that. Adventurous are in that category. And the last one, honorable, to me, that is like on the social emotional piece. Things like loyalty and compassion, things that we already as Oak Royals, we want to teach our students and we want them to strive for. So I thought it was interesting that what the community said, like outsiders, Inflections, they're not us. They were able to see some of the things that, you know, our community as a staff, our kids, we have all kind of been like working towards to represent, and also how it fit in nicely or interestingly with those 3 circles, for MTSS.
So I was really super excited to get all that. I couldn't wait for them to come and tell us what are the big 3 things. When you pass by other high schools or when you look at other organizations, they usually, you know, you're able to cite your values pretty quickly. So the next step, what they did was they came back to Academic Senate. They presented this in a much, they just used more words to explain what we went through. And then they asked us, did this feel right? So we spent some time discussing and reflecting. They also went through the same process with the high school Academic Senate to make sure that it felt right. Like, you know, here you are, does this feel good to you? And we all agreed that, yeah, it's a pretty good reflection. So the next piece is they wordsmith these ideas into a way that we will be able to brand our schools. And I say schools because, you know, they only are with us for a couple short years. We want to build that 6-year pathway from here all the way to graduation. So we will have the same what are called maxims, which are those big ideas. The big ideas, how are we going to incorporate this so that way when we're building our system, we're reflecting back what is valuable to our community, to us. So we're being true to us while we are building that awesome system. So that's what's next. They'll be here on January 29th. Our academic senators will meet, and then we will utilize that input so we can draft an instructional focus. So you see how all of this is coming together? So we'll be able to reflect the values as well as what our instructional focus is going to be. We'll wordsmith some stuff. We will get it out to you in your departments for you to hash over and, you know, reflect and refine it, the language, and then we will come together to determine what is our instructional focus, so we can be focused in our instruction, and then that's a building block for us as we move forward. Whew! Sound good?
You did it.
Yeah. Anybody exhausted? Just me? Guys, I just want you to know how much I absolutely appreciate your attention, your input, everything that you do for our kids on a day-to-day basis. I am going to step out, all the administrators are going to step out of the room, so that way TCEA, if you have any announcements or questions, you can discuss in private, and if I'll be available to discuss any of this, answer questions. I'm open to ideas at any point, so please, please, please.